My name is Tiago. I am the instructor of the AI product management course at 1 Month PM, and I am also the VP of AI at Stratio. But for all that matters, this is the one thing you need to know about me. Yes, so not a product manager. So this starts really promising, right? I cannot see your faces. I will assume that you are as excited as I am to have a non-product person doing a talk about product, right? Call it maybe a call for help or something like that. So, and the goal really is to explain why, at this particular time, product management is so important for AI, and in my opinion, maybe the most important thing about AI and the current wave that we are experiencing. Okay, so apocalypse or revolution, that is the main question that we will try to address, and why PMs are so important for that. The first thing I want to tell you about is the value chain when we think about AI at the moment. And the value chain is incredibly fragmented, and we see different players with different value propositions a little bit all over the place. So you have infrastructure players like NVIDIA, for example, quite well known. You have players that are mostly trying to build a competitive advantage around data, proprietary data that they own. You have players that are trying to build around providing models, OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on. Those are model as a service providers, and they are trying to base the competitive advantage there. And today I will try to build my case around the fact that actually, if you are to build sustainable competitive advantage for AI products, you need to do it around the application, the interface. Because really, you may have the best data, you may have the best models, and you may have the infrastructure to run everything, but really, you will be interfacing with the user through a product, yes? And how can we make sure that we build something that delivers value and in a way that not only allows users and the society to perceive value, but to actually get value from AI? Why is it so important? So the data source for the chart, really, top quality data source is Google Trends, but it's here to make a point. And the point is, 1 year ago, there was this boom about crypto, and we can see how that turned out, right? So, and I think that we need to be very careful, and we need to think very carefully about the products that we are building to avoid the same situation, because we are not guaranteed at all that this will continue to grow. And why is it growing? I think, so my personal opinion is that it's growing because we all understand the potential. It's not like crypto where sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's hard to understand the use cases. No, we can all understand, right? We can be more efficient, we can think better, we can automate things. And automation and efficiency, we can reason about these things. They are quite tangible, right? So we do understand the potential, and we do understand potential applications. But we are at a point where we need to go from this perception of value to real value. And we have a limited window of time to do that. If we don't move from perception to realization of value, we will have this same faith, right? And this is something that we need to carefully consider. How do we go from perception of value to actual value? For the purpose of this talk, we will not discuss infrastructure much. I think the infrastructure, it requires, gigantic upfront investment. It requires specialized. So it would be my proposal that we don't build our competitive advantage to compete with AWS or NVIDIA or something else. Maybe we need to focus elsewhere. So let's start with the reasoning. Why not data? Why not the models? Okay. So this is one of my favorite quotes about AI, and I think you should really, it's a small quote, but I think we should consider it very deeply. Machine learning is really good at partially solving just about any problem. And this is great, right? Because we get a sense of applicability, so any problem, right? The range is quite impressive, but we should not expect AI to completely solve any problem. Because for that, you would need complete data. For that, you would need to have training data covering all the possible patterns that exist for your problem. And we know that not only it is incredibly expensive, not only it is incredibly time consuming, but more importantly, you are very unlikely to have enough time to collect all of the data about a specific problem. So typically this is the story that we often hear. And the story is, okay, what you need is to activate the data flywheel. And what is the data flywheel? Is this notion that you build something with AI. Maybe you are using OpenAI. Maybe you are using something really simple and you are building a simple wrapper around that. And you are able to deliver some value for some limited tasks, for example. But you deliver enough value that some users will use your product, and therefore you start collecting data. You start collecting some data, and you improve the AI that you have. So maybe now you are using a fine-tuned model. Maybe you are not using OpenAI anymore. Maybe you are using your own proprietary model. Or maybe you are simply, over time, incorporating this data, training, retraining your model for it to get better. And you will have a better product. If you have a better product, you will have more users generating more data, generating better models that will lead to a better product. And you go on continuously until you conquer the world. So this is the narrative that we have today for many of these problems, for many of these products. And I want to tell you that we need to be smarter about this. So collecting data by itself is not enough to build a good product. And why is that the case? So there are many reasons. I want to highlight something that is very counterintuitive to me and that I want to share with you. So the thing about the patterns that we want to capture, so some of the patterns are really common and they are super frequent. And if we think about the distribution and imagine these being the frequency for each one of the patterns, some patterns, they will be super frequent. And if you are collecting data for enough time, for certain, you will capture some of these problems. But the thing about AI is that for you to be perfect and for you to be able to cover any single pattern, you need to cover the patterns that are here. And they are incredibly infrequent. We are talking about patterns that may appear every 200 years or something like that. Think about COVID, for example, and the patterns that we were trying to capture at that time. And if you want to be perfect, you need good coverage of this region of your distribution. And therefore, if you are blindly collecting data, what are you doing? You are building an empty flywheel. Because the flywheel is spinning, you are collecting more data, but you are collecting data about the patterns that you already have in your data set. So you are paying for data storage, you are paying for data processing, you are paying for the feedback loop that you have in your product, and your product, after a while, after you cover the most frequent patterns, you stop improving. Because you need a different strategy to go after the long tail. And maybe it's not a data strategy. Maybe it's building a product that is more robust and that is fault tolerant and is able to deal gracefully with this long tail. And therefore, if you need to capture, and it's interesting, there is this statistic that I really like from Google Search. And from Google Search, the statistic is, even though, of course, you have certain searches that are certain queries that are very frequent, 60% of the search intent lives in the long tail. Let me repeat for you, 60%. Because this is incredibly important. Because this will tell us that even though these patterns are, each one of them individually, not frequent at all, together, they make up most of the functionality. And this is the counterintuitive thing. Individually, they are not frequent. But if you consider them together, they comprise most of the functionality that you need to build. And another thing, and this is a particular, something very particular about certain problems, sometimes it's even worse because you don't have a single, so maybe you have certain patterns for Portugal, certain patterns for Poland, certain patterns for Brazil, and whatnot. So you have these different patterns. So not only do you need to cover one long tail, but you need to cover multiple because you will have different patterns depending on segmentation. We are quite familiar with this problem from past experience. So I want to tell you about, so let me make this point explicit. The thing is, over time, if you are collecting more data blindly, in the beginning you are receiving a lot of value because you are collecting patterns that you don't have already, but over time you capture more and more of the same, more and more of the same, so even though the value of your data is increasing over time, you have decreasing marginal returns. What do I mean? It means that over here, the value of an additional data point is lower than here. Why is that the case? Because in all probability, the patterns that you will be collecting, you already have them in your data. So there is no additional value. So building around data alone will not cut it. And not only that, there is another important thing, that you are paying for all of that. Someone is paying for all of that. Maybe with company money, maybe investor money, but someone is paying for that. And after a while, so since the cost of data continues to increase, regardless of whether the data is good or bad, it continues to increase, the value that you receive from the data stops increasing, and over time, you may be losing money. You may have a negative return on investment on your data. And this is incredibly counterintuitive, but it is the basis of my argument why it's really hard to build competitive advantage around data. About models, I think we are now more or less all of us familiar with these. And the thing is, now with the foundation models that we have from OpenAI, from Anthropic, from other providers, all the open source models that we can use from Hugging Face, for example, what do we have? We have models that are increasingly general, right? So they cover many, many tasks. They are interchangeable. So maybe now you are using OpenAI and you can swap and you can use Hugging Face, or you can swap and you can use Anthropic, or maybe you can swap and you can use something else. And they are widely available. And over time, as competition increases, they will become ever more affordable. And one thing that is really exciting, so since the release of Llama, using 4chan or whatever for the weights, so not particularly canonical, but now the licensing is done and so on. So the research is really going into really nice directions. So you can use open source models and you can have more efficient models that are smaller, that are cheaper. You can have models that you don't need the model to know every single thing about the world. You need the model to be good on the task that you are trying to solve, right? So you can have a smaller model that is more tailored for your use case. And open source is enabling that as well. And more we see these platforms for collaboration, not only between companies working on models, but also with the society at large and with different data sources. So TLDR, bottom line, where do we are? So 5 years ago, 7 years ago, this was a legitimate value proposition. My model is better than yours. It's not anymore, right? It will not be this, because it's very easy to simple. You import a library with some data, you can have a good enough model. Or you can use a provider and you will have a good enough model. So if you are not building around this value proposition anymore, what can you do? And my proposal here is really that to deliver value, we need products. And we need products that understand the user, understand workflows, and are able to execute on that. And I really like this analogy for AI products when we compare AI products with traditional software. Traditional software, it's more like a garden, right? It's more controlled. I will plant these flowers here. These trees will go there. And I plan everything. And then I execute on my mission. And I know the schedule for maintenance. I know that I need to take care of the plants. I know that certain plants will be giving fruit towards specific seasons of. I can control, and I have that sense of control. I can predict how the garden will grow. Why? Because it's my plan, and I am planning that. With AI products, it's more like a forest, really. What you can do is you can influence the forest. You can nudge the forest in certain directions. But the thing is, these products, they are learning from the environment. They are learning from the data. They are learning from the way your users are using the product. And therefore, you don't have complete control over the evolution of these products. And this is entirely different. It's this uncertainty, it's this dynamic setting that really, in my opinion, sets AI products apart. So they will be interacting with the environment, and therefore, if you are to improve the forest, you will need holistic approaches that consider the data, that consider the model, that consider the ways the user is using your product, and you don't have complete control. So I have a table for us just to with a summary of the main differences. So for example, the behavior, We are used to determine the behavior, but now the behavior will adapt based on the data, based on usage. When it comes to control, we are used to having very precise control, and now we can only influence the product, influence the user towards successful outcomes. The intervention, we are used to, solving bugs and improving and creating features and whatnot, but maybe there is one pattern that emerges today in our model, in our product, that we don't cover. And we are delivering a terrible experience to users. We need to act now. And we need to act based on what we are seeing, based on the way the forest is developing. When it comes to consistency, we are used to, perfect consistency when building traditional products because they follow the code. And if we know exactly the logic, if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that. Now, the consistency will be dynamic. Since the patterns are changing over time, the exact same user action may have one outcome today and a different outcome tomorrow. And this is the way it is. But we need to explain the users, and we need to be able to interact with the users in such a way as to empower them to deal with the system. And finally, when it comes to recovery, if we see a bug in traditional software, we go there and we fix the code. We change the code. Now we cannot do that. Maybe we need to collect more data. Maybe we need to use a different model. Maybe we need to change the feedback loop. These are the things that really matter. And therefore, your action needs to be broader in nature, holistic. Again, think about it's more like foresting than gardening. Therefore, this is what you need, right? You need an holistic approach. And this is, for me, the trick, the secret sauce of product management for AI products. You need to be the guardian of the forest. You need to have an holistic approach where you understand the data, the model, and the application, and how they work together to deliver successful product outcomes, which ultimately is the only thing we care about, successful product outcomes. And therefore, I would say the recent trend towards wrappers, so building something very simple around OpenAI or building something very simple around these providers, it's maybe not really the way to go. And maybe the way we need to go about building competitive advantage is really the old-fashioned way, building a superior product, delivering superior product experience. And to me, the key for that is really the key value proposition and the key task for an AI product manager, in my opinion, is really understanding the workflows. And this is something that we see quite frequently. Oh, we need to understand the workflows and the workflows. And what are the workflows, guys? No one really knows. So let me tell you the 4 workflows that I highlight as being something product managers in AI need to own and need to build. And these things are, the first one is data sourcing. How do you go about ensuring high quality data sourcing from sources you can trust, from processes that are not biased, that you can trust? So that is one thing. I am not telling product managers that you need to be data analysts or data scientists. No. We are operating at a different level, higher level. You need to be able to tell if you can trust that data source and if your processes for data collection are correct or not. The second one is, how do you go about collecting user feedback? And how do you go about collecting feedback from the community? This is incredibly important because this will ensure that as the forest grows and the forest adapts, it will iterate in the right direction. And what is that? Towards successful product outcomes. And the third thing is collaboration. You have data analysts, you have data scientists, you have machine learning engineers, you have designers, you have software. It's impossible. But someone needs to be able to provide a common vision, a shared vision for everyone to rally around that and to understand what needs to be built. And that, to me, is also the role of the AI product manager, establishing this unifying vision that can, simplify communication and provide shared context that everyone can use to guide their decision making. And finally, ethics and compliance. You need to be the voice of the user. You need to advocate for the user, and you need to advocate for successful outcomes that are ethical and that are compliant. And if you do that, there are 2 things that I believe will come by design. If you build those workflows, you will be building user-centric AI, and you will be building responsible AI. And if you do that, that to me is AI product management. AI plus successful product outcomes will enable us to deliver the value that we need to deliver in order to continue growing. And to me, the three main verticals for AI product management are building the workflows, AI-centric, user-centric AI design, and responsible AI. And therefore, this is my proposed job description for AI product management and the rationale. Thank you.
Okay, very well. Really like the idea of the forest ranger. Okay, so let's move on to the questions. We have 3 questions. Can we have more, please? I'm starting with the first. So from Telmo, he's asking you the following question. Some say that one of the top reasons behind the success of ChatGPT was the interface and how it made it easy for users to interact with the AI. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree, but I agree with that, and I also think that ChatGPT is an outstanding data collection device, right? So we always need to understand that the business model for OpenAI, they have a B2B business model, and they are also selling the API to companies. And of course, we were talking about the feedback loops, yes? You need to implement feedback loops in order to evaluate the system and improve the system over time. So not only I think the interface was important, but I think it is a tremendous feedback collection play that will allow them to refine the models in the future.
It's part of the products. Okay, very well. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Another question from Greg. How can you identify valuable edge use cases or edge cases when you have collected enough data, especially when the confirmation that a data point in an edge is an edge case only becomes available later in the feedback loop?
Well, great question. It will be hard in 1 minute. Let me give you general advice, and if you are there, feel free to reach out to me, and I am happy to have a discussion around this. But the one thing I always teach is you need to identify your minimum. So we are used to the MVP, right? The minimum viable product. And here you need to identify your minimum viable task. What is the simpler task, the simplest task that you can solve with the data that you have that already provides value to your users? Because if you do that, you will have some users using the product, and you are activating the data collection, you are activating the data flywheel, and you start collecting at least some of the edge cases. But to me, the core oftentimes is really identifying a task that is small enough to start with, and that will allow you to collect that data as soon as possible.
Okay, now for something a little bit different. Thank you. Do you believe the current AI boom is sustainable? Can we keep booming?
I don't know, guys. Come on. So one thing for sure, I think that the space is very fragmented at the point, and it's very crowded, very, very crowded. So you have many companies that are emerging, particularly in certain spaces like customer success. There are many of them. And I would say that the space feels too crowded. It's impossible for all of these companies and use cases to succeed. So I would expect some sort of filtering to happen throughout the next maybe 1 to 2 years. Some of these companies will merge, some of them will fail, some of them will succeed, but I would expect a less fragmented space and some sort of, now we are diverging, I would expect some sort of convergence and some sort of, normalization at some point in the near future.
Okay, just enough time for another one, João. Keep going. How do you reach enough literacy to cover all these disciplines?
The billion-dollar question. Yes. There are ways to do that, but I wouldn't focus there. I think that when I talk about data and models and application, I am not saying that you are the data expert and the model expert and the application expert. That is impossible. And if you see that in a job description, run far away. That is impossible. Now, you need to, at the higher level, you need to build the processes to collect the proper data, to make sure that you are selecting the right model, to make sure that you are collecting feedback from the users to refine the product. So the product manager operates at the higher level. you are not building the data, you are not building the model, no, but you need to ensure that the workflows are properly set and the incentives are properly aligned and everyone is collaborating across the 3 verticals to deliver value to the user. You are not the expert, you are the enabler. And you need to, of course, understand a little bit of each, but you don't need to be the expert. So reasonable expectations, I think, is also the key.